There is a specific kind of cruelty that comes dressed in a smile. That arrives with a champagne glass in one hand and an audience already assembled and a tone of voice so light, so amused, so perfectly calibrated to sound like fun, that the person it is aimed at has no clean way to defend against it without looking like the problem. It is the cruelty of people who have never been laughed at in a room like the one they are standing in, who have never felt the specific weight of being made into entertainment, who have never understood, because they have never had to understand, what it costs a person to hold themselves together when the room is deciding whether to laugh at them or with them. This story is about one night in Charleston, South Carolina. About a woman who was handed a mop and told to dance. About what happened when she did. And about the man standing at the edge of the room who had been waiting his whole life without knowing it for a moment exactly like this one. Charleston in October is the most beautiful version of itself. The heat of summer finally releasing its grip on the city. The air doing something complicated and lovely between warm and cool. The old streets of the historic district in the early evening light, the pastel houses and the wrought iron gates and the smell of jasmine coming over the garden walls, look like something from a painting of a place that is trying very hard to make you forget everything complicated about its history. Charleston is very good at that, at being beautiful in a way that asks you not to look too closely. The Callaway Grand is the finest hotel in the city, which in Charleston means something specific. It means high ceilings and heart pine floors and plasterwork that took craftsmen 3 months and a chandelier in the ballroom that has been there since 1887 and has survived 4 hurricanes and one very bad renovation attempt in the 1970s that the current owners do not discuss. It means a ballroom that can hold 300 people with enough room between them that everyone feels they have been given appropriate space. It means staff in black and white who move through a room with the practiced near invisibility of people who have been trained to be present without being seen. On the evening of the 19th of October, the Callaway Grand Ballroom is hosting the annual gala for the Lowcountry Children's Foundation, which provides educational resources to underserved communities across the South Carolina coast. It is the most attended charity event in the city's social calendar. 300 guests. Black tie. Tables at $1,200 a seat. The kind of event that raises a great deal of money for a worthy cause while also functioning as the most important social occasion of the autumn season. And everyone in the room is aware of both of these facts simultaneously and has made their peace with the coexistence. The flowers alone cost more than most people's monthly rent. Garrett Cole paid for the flowers. He pays for a great deal of things at this event because he is the primary benefactor of the Lowcountry Children's Foundation, has been for 6 years, and because when Garrett Cole involves himself in something he does it completely or he does not do it at all. He is 41 years old. 6'1". The kind of build that comes from 20 years of physical work before the money arrived, that no amount of good tailoring entirely conceals, which he has never been interested in concealing anyway. His face is not a face that belongs naturally in a black tie ballroom. It is a face that has been in weather, that has spent years on job sites and in trailers and in trucks on highways before dawn, making the decisions that turned one construction crew in Mount Pleasant into the largest privately held construction and development firm in the Southeast. Cole Construction. 1,200 employees. Contracts in 9 states. A philanthropic foundation that funds educational programs, workforce development, and about a dozen other things that Garrett quietly insists on not making a press release about, because in his opinion the work is what matters and the announcement is for people who need the credit more than they need the outcome. He grew up in North Charleston. Not the historic district. Not the pastel houses and the jasmine gardens. North Charleston, in the part of it that people from the other side of the city don't visit voluntarily. A 2-bedroom house on a street where 3 of the streetlights were broken for the entirety of his childhood and nobody came to fix them. A father who worked double shifts at the port. A mother who cleaned offices downtown, 3 buildings, 5 nights a week, for 22 years. He has thought about his mother every single time he has walked into a room like this one. About what she would make of the chandelier. About what it would cost her, in hours of work, to pay for one of these seats. About whether she would feel comfortable in this room or whether the room would do what rooms like this one do, which is to make certain people feel that they are in the wrong place without ever saying so directly. He has never fully resolved his relationship with these rooms. He attends them because the work requires it. Because the money raised in rooms like this one goes somewhere real. Because he has learned, over years of building things, that you work with the materials available and you do not wait for perfect conditions. But he has never stopped being aware of what they are. And he has never, not once in 6 years of attending this gala, stopped noticing the staff. Not in the way guests notice staff, which is barely and instrumentally. He notices them the way his mother would have noticed them. With recognition. Brielle Fontaine arrived in Garrett Cole's life 14 months ago at a fundraiser in Atlanta. She is 33 years old. She is from a Savannah family of the kind that has a foundation named after it on the side of a building at a small liberal arts college in Georgia. She is the kind of beautiful that is also a kind of armor. The kind that has been cultivated and maintained and deployed with the precision of someone who understood very early that it was a resource and should be treated as one. She is charming at dinners. She is exactly the right amount of opinionated on safe subjects. She knows which fork and which wine and which topics to approach and which to navigate around. She has, in 14 months, appeared beside Garrett at 17 public events and handled every one of them with a fluency that his previous attempts at dating women who were alarmed by his schedule and his world had not produced. She fit. That is what he thought. She fit the life he had built, the public version of it, the one that required someone who could walk into a room like this one and know instinctively how to be in it. He told himself that fit was enough. He told himself that fit was actually what you wanted, that the other things, the spark and the friction and the sense of being genuinely known by someone, were the inventions of people who had never had to build anything practical. He was wrong about this, but he had not yet understood that he was wrong. He understood it on the evening of the 19th of October, in the ballroom of the Callaway Grand, because of a woman with a mop. Rosa Beaumont has worked at the Callaway Grand for 3 years. She is 36 years old. She is the kind of person that rooms like the Callaway Ballroom are specifically designed to make invisible. She is there when you need her and absent when you don't, and she is very good at both. She has been very good at her job since she started. Not because the job is where she expected to be at 36, but because Rosa Beaumont, when she commits to something, commits completely. She grew up in Orangeburg, 2 hours inland from Charleston. She started dancing at 4 years old in her grandmother's living room, watching old competition footage on a television set that had a crack in the corner of the screen that her grandmother had covered with electrical tape. By the time she was 12, she was competing. By 16, she had placed in regional competitions in 4 categories. By 22, she was on the national circuit. Ballroom, which, if you have never seen it at that level, is something that requires explanation because the word does not begin to contain what it actually is. It is not the ballroom of amateur nights and television competitions. It is 10 years of technical training in your body so that every movement comes from a foundation of complete physical intelligence. It is the waltz at a level where the floor seems to be optional. The tango at a level where 2 people become one mechanism, precise and inevitable. The foxtrot, the quickstep, the Viennese waltz, all of it at a standard where the judges are looking for things that happen between the movements, in the fractions of a second where technique ends and something else begins. Rosa had that something else. Her coaches used different words for it. Presence. Authority. The thing that makes you watch one person when there are 8 couples on the floor. She competed nationally for 6 years. She never won the national title. She placed. She came close twice, close enough that people in the circuit knew her name and knew her number and expected, in the year she was 28, that this was going to be the year. It was not. On a Tuesday morning in February, driving to a practice session in Columbia, a truck ran a red light on Gervais Street and hit her car on the driver's side. She was in the hospital for 11 days. Her left knee required surgery, then physical therapy. Then more surgery when the first didn't hold correctly. 18 months of recovery, during which the money she had saved, the small careful savings of someone who had been competing on a circuit that is not known for its financial generosity, ran down to nothing. She could walk. She could run eventually. She could do most things. She could not dance at that level again. The knee would not sustain the demands. Her coach told her this carefully over the phone 6 months after the accident, when the medical picture had become clear enough to speak plainly about. She thanked him for telling her. She hung up. She sat in her apartment in Colombia for a long time. Then she did what she had always done when things required doing. She moved forward. She got a job. Then another. Then she came to Charleston, where a cousin knew a manager at the Callaway Grand, and she put on the black and white uniform and learned the rooms and the service rhythms and the names of the regular guests. And she was good at it. She is good at it. She smiles at guests. She keeps the rooms. She moves through the ballroom during events with a cart and a quiet efficiency that the guests do not see because she has made herself very good at not being seen. On the evening of the 19th of October, she is working the gala. She has worked this gala twice before. She knows the rhythms of it. She knows where the guests accumulate and where they thin out. She knows that by 9 o'clock the dancing starts and the catering staff need the floor cleared on the east side, and that this requires moving through the room at a particular angle with the linen cart. She is doing this at 9:15 when Brielle Fontaine notices her. The noticing is not accidental. This is important to understand. Brielle is not the kind of person who does accidental things in public. Everything is placed. Everything is for an audience, assessed for an audience, calibrated for the response it will produce. She has been at the gala for 2 hours. She has been charming and correct and exactly what is required. She has stood beside Garrett as he spoke to donors and foundation board members and the mayor of Charleston, and she has smiled and contributed at the right moments and been beautifully, precisely appropriate. And she has had 3 glasses of champagne, which is not too many for someone who does not become less controlled with champagne. Brielle becomes, with champagne, slightly more willing to act on the things she already wants to do. She sees Rosa crossing the floor with the linen cart near the east wall. She says something to the woman beside her, a laugh, something Garrett doesn't catch. Then she excuses herself from the conversation. Garrett watches her cross the room. He is not sure why he watches. Something in how she moves, with a purpose that is different from her usual social navigation. He watches her reach Rosa. He watches her say something. He watches Rosa stop. From across the room, Garrett cannot hear the words. He will learn them later from Rosa and from 3 other guests who were close enough. Brielle approaches Rosa with the expression she uses when she is about to be delightful. She says, loud enough for the nearest cluster of guests to hear, "Oh, don't you want to put that cart down for a moment and enjoy the music?" Rosa says, "I'm working, ma'am. I'll be out of your way." Brielle says, "No, really, this is a party. Everyone should be dancing." Then she turns to the people nearest to her, 5 or 6 guests who are now paying attention, and she says, "Don't you think she should dance? It's a charity gala. Everyone should participate." There is laughter. Not from everyone. From some. From the people who understand what is being offered to them, which is a small amusement, a moment of entertainment that costs them nothing. Rosa says, "I really need to finish my round, ma'am." Brielle says, "Oh, come on, just a little. Show us what you've got." Then she reaches to the linen cart. She picks up the mop that is leaning against the side of it. She holds it out to Rosa. "There you go," she says. "Now you have a partner." The laughter that follows is louder. More people are watching now. The radius of the audience has expanded, the way it does when something is happening that people are not sure how to look away from. Rosa looks at the mop. She looks at Brielle. She looks at the room full of people in $1,200 seats looking at her. And then she takes the mop. She takes it in her right hand. She holds it the way you would hold a partner. Not as a joke. Not with the performance of someone accepting a humiliation with a smile to make the audience comfortable. She holds it correctly, like a dancer holds a partner. And then she begins. What happens in the next 4 minutes in the Callaway Grand Ballroom is something that every person who was there will describe differently depending on what they were paying attention to. Some will say it was the footwork. The way her feet found positions that are not accidental, that are the product of years of muscle memory, that tell you immediately, if you know what you are looking at, that you are watching someone who trained. The heel leads of the waltz, precise as a clock. The delayed weight transfers that are one of the things that separate a trained dancer from someone who has learned steps, the moments where the body holds just a fraction longer than you expect before moving, which creates the sensation of floating. Some will say it was the posture. The spine that changes when she begins to move. Not stiffens. Lengthens. Becomes the spine of someone who has been holding it correctly in muscle memory for 15 years, even when she is not dancing. Even when she is pushing a linen cart through a ballroom. Even when the room is trying to make her small. Some will say it was her face. Not the careful pleasantness of a woman in a service job who has learned to be whatever the guest needs. Her own face. Rosa Beaumont's actual face. The one that only comes out when she is dancing, which the people who knew her on the circuit would have recognized immediately. Still. Concentrated. Somewhere between here and somewhere else. The face of someone who has returned to a place they were taken from. The mop does not matter. She dances with it the way you would dance with someone who is beneath your level but whom you are generous enough to carry, and the generosity of it, the sheer technical grace that she extends even to this prop that was handed to her as a humiliation, makes the joke that Brielle was making collapse entirely. You cannot mock someone who is doing that. You can try. But the room will not help you. The music from the small orchestra at the far end of the ballroom continues. They are playing, by coincidence or providence, a Viennese waltz. The tempo is precise. Rosa moves to it. And the room, which had been buzzing with cocktail conversation and the accumulated noise of 300 people in formal wear, goes quiet. Not all at once. In concentric circles outward from where Rosa is dancing. The people nearest go quiet first. Then the next ring. Then the next. Until the only sounds in the ballroom are the orchestra and the heel strikes of Rosa Beaumont's black work shoes on the heart pine floor. Garrett Cole has been moving since the moment he saw Brielle hand over the mop. He moves quickly for a big man. He has spent 20 years on construction sites where moving quickly matters, and he does not lose that quality in a ballroom. But he stops when Rosa begins to dance. He stops because everyone stops. Because the room has changed in a way that requires stopping to understand. He watches. He watches the footwork. He watches the posture. He watches the face. He has spent 14 months telling himself that he is not a man who is particularly attuned to beauty. That he is practical. That he deals in what is real and measurable. He watches Rosa Beaumont dance and understands that he has been confusing practicality with a failure of attention. This is real. This is as real as anything he has seen in years. He also watches Brielle. He watches her face during the dance, which is something she did not anticipate anyone doing, because she expected to be watching Rosa's face and finding humiliation there, and instead she is finding something else entirely, and she does not know what to do with her own expression. She cycles through several things. Surprise, a recalibration, then something that settles into discomfort, the particular discomfort of someone who set a trap and is watching it work completely wrong. Then, and this is the one that tells Garrett what he needs to know, a reaching back for composure. A decision to reassert. Because Brielle does not lose gracefully. He has seen this before in small ways, in private moments that he catalogued and did not examine closely enough. He examines them now, quickly, in the 45 seconds before she speaks. The dinner 3 months ago where the service was slow and her voice went to a register he didn't like. The car journey where his assistant called with a change of plan and Brielle's response, when she thought he wasn't fully listening, was colder than it needed to be. The weekend at her family's house in Savannah where she spoke to the housekeeper in a tone that he noticed and said nothing about because he was choosing, in the way he had learned to choose in the past year, to let it go. He has been choosing to let things go. He understands now that this is not the same as those things not being there. Rosa's footwork and Brielle's face and 14 months of small moments. He chose not to examine, and the room going silent in the way that rooms only go silent when something true is happening. All of it arrives at once. He begins to move again. Brielle speaks before Rosa finishes. She cannot help it. She says to the people around her, in a voice that is reaching for lightness and not quite finding it, "Well, that's lovely. I'm sure she can go back to work now." 1 or 2 people laugh. Not many. The room is not with her anymore and she knows it. She says, "Okay, show's over, back to the party." She turns toward the nearest group of guests, starting to redirect, starting to reconstruct the social moment into something she controls. Garrett steps onto the floor. He steps directly onto the floor, in his black tie and his suit that doesn't quite conceal 20 years of construction sites, and he walks to the middle of the room. He stops in front of Rosa. Rosa has stopped dancing. She is holding the mop and breathing slightly faster than usual, and her face has returned to the careful pleasantness, and she is looking at him the way someone looks at a situation that is about to require managing. He reaches out his hand. Not for the mop. For her hand. The way you offer your hand to a partner. He says, "Would you finish it?" 3 words. Not a statement. A question. She looks at him for a moment. She looks at his face. She looks at the room. She puts the mop against the nearest table. She takes his hand. He cannot dance at her level. He has never pretended otherwise. He is a man who knows what he can and cannot do, and what he can do on a dance floor is hold a frame and follow a lead and get out of the way of someone who knows what they are doing. He does all 3. He holds his frame. He lets her lead without making it visible that she is leading, which is its own kind of skill. He gets out of her way. And Rosa Beaumont dances. The orchestra, led by a conductor who has been watching the room and understanding his job for 35 years, does not stop. He cues the waltz back to the beginning. He gives her the music again. She takes it. 300 people in a ballroom, and not one of them speaks. Not one. The phones come out. Not in the way phones come out when people are looking for something to mock or share as spectacle. In the way phones come out when people understand they are watching something they want to remember. When it ends, the applause begins before the last note does. It begins on one side of the room and it builds, and it becomes the kind of applause that a ballroom like this one, with its heart pine floors and its 1887 chandelier, has produced before for orchestras and performers and speakers. But not for a woman in a black and white service uniform. Not like this. Garrett walks to Brielle. He does not do it with anger. He does not raise his voice. He is a man who built 1,200 jobs and 9 states of contracts by understanding that how you say a thing determines whether the thing gets done, and what he has to say right now needs to get done cleanly. He says, "I need to talk to you." She says, with the composure of someone who is performing composure, "Of course, let's find somewhere private." He says, "This is fine here." She looks at him. He says, "I've been letting things go for about 14 months. Small things. Things I saw and catalogued and put away because I wanted to believe they were small enough not to matter. I can't do that anymore after tonight." Brielle says, "Garrett, this is not the place." He says, "I think it is. You made Rosa the entertainment for this room. I think the room should hear this. He is not performing for the room. He is not playing to an audience. He is a man who does not have a relationship with performance, who has always found the theatrical version of things less useful than the plain one, and he is being plain." He says, "We're done. Not because of one night. Because of what one night showed me about everything before it." She says his name again. He says, "You're welcome to stay for the rest of the gala. The foundation's work is real and the cause is worth your attention. But we're done." He turns. He walks back across the floor to where Rosa is standing with 2 of the catering staff who have come to her side. He says to her, "I apologize for what happened tonight. Not on anyone's behalf. On my own. I saw it starting and I didn't move fast enough." Rosa looks at him. She has, in 12 years of competitive dancing and 3 years of hotel work, developed a very accurate read of people. She reads him now. She says, "You moved fast enough." He says, "I want to talk to you, if you're willing. Not tonight, but I have a program I fund. Workforce development and arts education for people who lost careers to injury or illness. It's been running for 2 years and the dance component of it doesn't have the right person leading it." She says, "I'm working, Mr. Cole." He says, "I know. So am I." He reaches into his jacket. He takes out a card. He sets it on the linen cart. He says, "No pressure. No obligation, but you have my number if you want it." He goes back to his table. He sits down. He drinks his water. Around him the room slowly reanimates, the way rooms do after something significant has passed through them. The orchestra begins to play again. The guests return to their conversations. The gala continues. Rosa finishes her round. She pushes the linen cart along the east wall, through the ballroom, through the service door. Before she goes through it, she picks up the card from the cart. She looks at it. She puts it in her pocket. The video is online before midnight. Several people filmed it from different angles, and the version that spreads most quickly is one taken from the north side of the room that captures Rosa from the moment she takes the mop to the moment Garrett offers his hand. It has a clarity that accidental footage rarely has, because the person who took it had the presence of mind to hold steady and not zoom. By morning, it has been seen by 2 million people. By the following evening, 12 million. The comments divide into the predictable columns that the internet divides everything into, but the majority of them are saying some version of the same thing, which is that they watched it 3 times and it made them feel something they were not prepared to feel on a Thursday night. Rosa does not see most of the coverage until Friday morning. She has the morning off and she is sitting at the kitchen table in the apartment she shares with her cousin in North Charleston, drinking coffee and looking at her phone with the expression of someone who is watching a flood approach from a distance and trying to work out whether their house is above the waterline. Her phone has rung 17 times since 7 a.m. She has answered 3 of those calls. One from her mother in Orangeburg, who has seen the video and is crying in the good way. One from a former coach who has not called her in 4 years and who says, simply, "There you are." One from a journalist who she declines politely. She is sitting with the 17th call still unanswered when she picks up Garrett Cole's card from where she left it on the kitchen table the night before. She has put it there when she got home and she has looked at it several times. She is a careful person. She does not make decisions quickly or lightly. She has learned, from a long period of rebuilding, that the decisions you make in the aftermath of significant events need more than the energy of those events to sustain them. She puts the card down. She finishes her coffee. She goes for a walk. She walks through her neighborhood in the October morning. She thinks about a studio. She has thought about a studio for 3 years, vaguely, in the way you think about things you have stopped believing are possible. Not a studio for competing. The knee will not sustain what competition requires. But a studio for teaching. For taking what 11 years of circuit training put in her body and transferring it to other people. For being in a room with music and movement and the thing that happens between them. For the thing she was doing last night in front of 300 people in a ballroom, which she has not done in 8 years and which she has missed every single day of those 8 years in a way that she has trained herself not to think about too directly because the missing of it was not useful. She walks for an hour. She comes back to the apartment. She picks up the card. She makes the call. Garrett answers on the second ring. He was expecting her, he tells her later. Not because he was sure she would call, but because he had thought about her enough the previous evening to understand that she would need to think about it, and that when she was done thinking she would call because she was not the kind of person who thinks carefully about something and then puts it back down. He tells her about the Foundation's workforce program, the real version of it, not the press release version. He tells her about the people in it. Former athletes. Former performers. People who had careers ended by injury or illness or circumstance and who needed a way back into the work that had defined them, even if it was a different shape of that work. He tells her that the dance component has been running with a rotating series of instructors for 18 months and that it is functional but that it needs someone who understands from the inside what it means to have had something taken from you that you built your life around. She listens. She asks specific questions. About budget. About facilities. About the degree of creative autonomy she would have in designing the program. He answers all of them. Then she asks, why me? Specifically. Not because of last night. He is quiet for a moment. Then he says, because of what you did when she handed you that mop. She waits. He says, you could have made it small. You could have done something jokey, something that played along, that defused it without threatening anyone. A lot of people would have. She says, yes. He says, you didn't. You did the real thing. In front of a room that was waiting to laugh at you. You took what they meant as a humiliation and you turned it into the truest thing in the room, and you didn't do it for them. You didn't do it to show anyone up. You did it because it was the thing you actually know how to do, and you did it completely. He pauses. I fund a program for people rebuilding after loss, he says. I want it run by someone who knows what that actually looks like. Last night you showed me what it looks like. She is quiet for a moment. Then she says, I'd need to see the facilities. He says, when are you free? She says, I'm working the weekend. Monday. He says, Monday works. The Lowcountry Arts and Workforce Foundation opens its new dance program in January. It is housed in a renovated building on King Street that the foundation has leased for 5 years. The studio is good. Properly sprung floor. Bars along one wall. Mirrors on 2 sides. Good sound system. Not fancy. Functional and real, which is the aesthetic of every project Garrett Cole puts his money into, and which Rosa, when she sees it for the first time on a Monday morning in November, approves of completely. She designs the program over 6 weeks. 3 tracks. 1 for people rebuilding movement-based careers after physical injury. 1 for young people in underserved communities who have never had access to formal dance training. 1 for adults with no dance background who simply want to be in a room where something true is happening. All 3 are full within 2 weeks of the application opening. She teaches 30 hours a week. She hires 2 additional instructors. She is in the studio every morning before anyone else arrives, and she is usually there when the last student leaves. She has not been this tired in 8 years. She has not been this alive in 8 years. The video has 4 million comments eventually when all the platforms finish counting. Brielle Fontaine posts a statement that is reviewed by a publicist and which uses the word context in a way that fails to help her. She is not in the story that follows, not in any version of it that matters. Rosa does one interview. She picks the journalist carefully. A woman from a South Carolina publication who covers arts and culture, and who is interested in the program rather than in the gala. The interview is about the studio, about what the program is doing, about the 30 people in the injury rehabilitation track and what happens to a person when the thing they built their life around is taken from them and what it takes to find a new shape for it. She mentions the gala once briefly because the journalist asks. She says, "Someone handed me a mop and expected me to be ashamed of it. I wasn't ashamed of it. I danced. It's the only thing I know how to do with music. I wasn't going to do it badly because they expected me to." Then she says, "The story is not the gala. The story is what comes after." The journalist, to her credit, understands this and structures the piece accordingly. It runs on a Tuesday morning, and by afternoon the foundation's application portal for the spring term has crashed from the volume of traffic. They fix the portal. The applications keep coming. Garrett Cole attends the studio's opening event in January. He comes alone. He sits in the back of the room and watches the first cohort of Rosa's rehabilitation program demonstrate something they have been working on for 3 weeks, which is not a performance piece and not a showcase but simply a sharing, the kind where you show someone what you have been doing without the apparatus of presentation around it. They are not at the level of what Rosa can do. Most of them will never be at that level. But they are doing the real thing, moving in their bodies the way people move when they have stopped apologizing for their bodies, when they have stopped shrinking, when they are doing fully and without performance the thing they actually know how to do. He watches Rosa watching them. Her face during this is the same face she had in the ballroom. Still, concentrated, somewhere between here and somewhere else. The face of someone who is exactly where they are supposed to be. Afterward, in the hallway, she finds him. She says, "Thank you for coming." He says, "Thank you for building this." She says, "You funded it." He says, "You built it." Those are different things. She looks at him. She is still working out who he is, fully. She is a careful person and he has given her no reason not to be careful, and she is taking the time that the situation requires. She says, "There's something I want to show you, if you have a few minutes." He says he has a few minutes. She takes him back into the studio. The students have gone. The room is empty. The late afternoon light is coming through the high windows on one side, and the mirrors are doing what mirrors do in that light, multiplying it, making the room feel both larger and more intimate than it is. She goes to the center of the floor. She says, "I've been working on something. Not for the program. For myself. Just to see if I could." He says, "I'd like to see it." She says, "It's not finished." He says, "That's fine." She takes a moment. She finds her position. And then Rosa Beaumont dances. In an empty studio on King Street in Charleston, South Carolina, in the January afternoon light, she dances for an audience of one. Not the waltz. Something she has made herself. Something that has the structure of her training underneath it and something else on top, something that could only have been made by someone who lost everything and came back to it changed, who carries both the loss and the return in her body at the same time. It is not finished. It is also, as unfinished things sometimes are, exactly what it needs to be. He watches it all the way through. When she stops, he doesn't say anything for a moment. Then he says, "You should finish it." She says, "I know." She is slightly out of breath. She looks at him. The careful assessment is still there in her eyes. But something else is beginning beside it. She says, "You can come back when it's done." He says, "I'll be here." And that is the story. Not the story the internet told, which was about a mop and a billionaire and a public ending of an engagement and the satisfying mathematics of humiliation reversed. That version is true as far as it goes. But it doesn't go far enough. The real story is a woman who had everything she built taken from her on a Tuesday morning on Gervais Street and who rebuilt it, slowly and without fanfare, in the 8 years that followed. Who was handed a mop by someone who thought a mop was a weapon. Who understood that a mop is just an object and that an object has only the meaning you assign it. Who danced. Not for the room. Not to prove anything. Not to win. Because the music was playing and her body knew what to do with music and she was not going to do it badly because someone expected her to. There is a specific kind of courage that doesn't announce itself. That doesn't look like a speech or a confrontation or a moment designed for the cameras. That looks like a woman finding her position on a heart pine floor. That looks like a spine that lengthens. That looks like footwork that the room goes quiet to hear. That kind of courage is not about the audience. It never was. The audience just happened to be there. And the man standing at the edge of the room, who had been waiting without knowing it for a moment exactly like this one, was just paying the right kind of attention. That is all it ever takes. One person, paying attention, at the right moment, in the right room. Some people will tell you that the most important part of the story is the video. The 4 million comments and the 12 million views and the moment Garrett Cole walked onto the floor and offered his hand. Some people will tell you the most important part is what he said to Brielle. The clean, quiet ending of something that had been wrong for 14 months. Some will tell you it is the studio on King Street. The 30 people in the rehabilitation program learning to move in their bodies again after years of moving carefully around the edges of what they lost. But the most important part of this story happened before any of that. It happened in the moment between Brielle handing Rosa the mop and Rosa beginning to dance. In that moment, Rosa Beaumont made a choice. Not the choice to dance beautifully, although she made that choice too. The choice before it. The choice to take the thing that was offered as humiliation and meet it with the truest thing she had. To not make it small. To not diffuse it. To not perform the smallness that the room was being invited to expect from her. To do the real thing. Completely. That choice was made in a fraction of a second on a heart pine floor by a woman who had spent 8 years rebuilding something and who understood, in that fraction of a second, that the rebuilt thing was real. Real enough to stand on. Real enough to offer to a room that was waiting to laugh. Real enough to carry the weight of what came after. Everything else followed from that. The silence in the room. The man walking onto the floor. The studio. The program. The unfinished dance in the January afternoon light. All of it followed from one woman taking a mop and deciding she was not going to be ashamed of it. Because she had something better than shame. She had 11 years of training in her body. She had the music. She had the floor. And she knew exactly what to do with all three.